Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Camper Report. And today we have a legend around the Bay Area. I've never personally been to the Bay Area, but we have a guy that was in radio for over 2 decades. It's crazy to think of that because that's over 20 years. That is incredible. I mean, absolute a legend around the Bay Area. Larry Krueger, how are you doing tonight, man? Worked for KNBR most of that time. So how are you doing? And it's a pleasure to have you on because definitely a big name, you know.
Well, Benjamin, thank you for having me on your show. Congratulations with the growth you've had in your show. And I have 4 kids, and one of my kids, who's 16-year-old baseball player, sophomore in high school, named Benjamin.
Oh, dang. Wow. That's okay. Yeah. So let's get to the first thing. Your radio career was obviously stretched over the 2000s and whatever, early 90s, throughout the 90s too. So since you were doing it for so long and you were in the radio business, I want to know, like, over the 2 decades, what were some things you learned over your time at KNBR and in the whole business? And who was your biggest mentor?
Well, that's a good one. I've had a lot of mentors through the years for sure. People that helped me out, and whether it was in football before I got into radio or in radio. I'd have to say, Ron Barr and Darren Peck over at Sports Byline USA Radio Network. That was my
Okay.
first job in radio in 1995, and I learned a lot about the radio industry from watching Ron conduct his nationally syndicated show every night, and then got a chance to learn all about the radio industry, from booking guests on that show to doing affiliate relations, negotiating with radio stations to take the programming, talking to program directors and general managers in the business about what they wanted out of the genre of sports radio. So I would say those guys. I mean, Ron Barr and Darren Peck at Sports Byline, they just gave me a whole education on radio, and it was invaluable, and it's proven to be invaluable.
When did you really, like, were you under them for a little while? Were you in a apprentice kind of thing where you learned from different people? Were you like under were they like your mentors, as in like your bosses that taught you a lot of things, or your things that you kind of just like you watched them and took away their speaking style or whatever?
Yeah,
I
well,
mean?
it was excuse me, it was a network that was run by Darren Peck. He was the executive.
Okay.
Ron Barr was the host of his own show. So I used to watch Ron and the way he would prepare for shows and the way he would handle interviews. But then I also watched Darren and how he ran the network, how he grew it, how he leveraged it for opportunities that existed to grow the business, how they use different strategic partnerships to grow. So I learned about both sides of the business side and the on the air side, from those two guys.
Yeah, that's really cool. And over the 20 years, I bet from somebody from your perspective, there was a lot of things, that you learned. And again, a person, you learn from, obviously it could be anything, mistakes or whatever, over 20 something years, and you learn so much, and then it makes you a better person coming into it and starting your own and it can really help for starting your own YouTube channel, or even being able to connect with people better because you've been in it for so long. Like, I bet that it's really, it wasn't much of a switch starting your own YouTube channel when you've already been doing it for so long.
Well, yeah, I mean, I definitely knew, some of the same things that are true in radio are true in YouTube or anything else. And, one of the, first people I met in radio, Benjamin, said to me, well, the key to radio is just make sure you keep talking. Just keep talking, because dead air is just that, dead. And so you have to understand how to how to keep talking for an extended period of time. Like you do this show, you're hosting this show. If you stop talking in the middle of the show, you have no show. So there are some strategies and things that you have to do. And I think people don't also realize that, to be on the air, you have to prepare. There's an old saying in radio that radio begins when everything that you prepared to do that night fails.
Okay.
You want to take calls, but suddenly the lines don't work, or you want to, just do a regular broadcast, but suddenly you're hearing yourself back in your ears 3 seconds later, or, there's all kinds of little things that happen
Yeah.
along the way that you have to kind of adjust to on the fly. And that's what live radio is all about. So you can plan and plan and plan and plan, but sometimes you're just going to be given hurdles, and how you overcome those hurdles is going to determine if you have a good show or not.
That's a good point. And again, I bet like the game of radio, or whatever you would call it, the game has changed a lot in 20 years. Like, how was it different in 2003, let's say, or whatever, than it is now? Like, the technology was obviously a lot less or whatever, but how is it different the way things went back then?
Well, it's interesting. It's like, the genre of sports radio probably began in the mid 80s in New York at
Okay.
WFAN. And it started to kind of take hold in the 90s. And then by the time you got to the early 90s, it was kind of a nationwide thing. I think early on, a lot of the top national guys, if you listen to their audience would imitate their speech pattern and their
Okay.
phrasing back to them. So if you listen to Jim Rome or JT the Brick, and they were the two national guys at the time, they had a certain kind of speech pattern and a certain kind of style. And then their audience kind of copied that style and spit it back to them. And then for years and years, the big emphasis in the industry was take phone calls. And now, and it used to be like one-man radio with taking calls. Now it's a lot fewer calls,
Okay.
more texts, and more two-man radio.
Okay.
Guys just having a conversation going back and forth, and less calls. People don't hold on, and you don't take call after call after call after call. I used to do a show where we had 5 lines, and the show was from 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. and we took calls the entire time. Literally the entire time, the entire show, all 5 lines would be ringing. We had a guy screening the calls, and we just went from Philly to Cleveland to Tulsa to Phoenix, all around the country, taking calls, talking sports. Now it's much less of a caller driven medium, and it's much more of a conversation between two people like we're having here.
More of like a Twitter, like you read comments off of Twitter or something like that. Like that, what you're talking about. Yeah.
Now there's a lot more ways to communicate too. So back then, maybe people faxed in things. People had faxes, if you can believe it or not. And then emails. There would be emails, faxes, and it was phone calls, and then faxes, and then emails. Now there's Twitter and all these, you can just sit there and read tweets all day. I mean, you can and I'm not saying that's bad. It's just a different way to communicate.
Yeah. Interesting how things changed. And again, all of the people that you're mentioning here, I've never heard of. So it's a whole different game. Obviously, people that were are any of these people like still in the radio bit, or all of them still are? Or,
JT the Brick does a show on Mad Dog Radio, and Jim Rome does a show on CBS. I believe it's on CBS Sports Television, their channel. And he does a show, I believe, on Premier Radio Networks. That's on a number of different radio stations around the country. So yeah, those guys are still on, but they're doing more interviews, and they're doing more, less caller driven radio than they used to do.
Okay. Interesting. So moving on, definitely interesting how it's changed, but moving on, what made you move on, or what made you move on from radio broadcasting and start your own YouTube channel? I'm interested to see like what happened there. Yeah.
Well, I mean, this was a better opportunity for me going forward because of the landscape changing. Um, the one thing about radio is that it's kind of a shrinking
Mm,
medium, and the one thing about YouTube is an incredibly growing medium,
yeah.
and so I think that to me that was a key factor for sure.
Okay. Yeah, and that's interesting. Well, a lot of people nowadays, it's easier to get addicted or not like addicted, but it's easier to grab audience members on YouTube than on radio. Like a lot more people are scrolling through YouTube nowadays than radio. So I could definitely see that for sure.
When was
Because
the last time? I mean, you're a teenager. When was the last time you listened to AM radio?
not in a while. I don't listen to the radio very much
Yeah,
anymore.
there you
Yeah.
go.
So, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a growing business again, and people get famous fast on here. I mean, radio is still great, but yeah, I definitely could see what you're saying about that for sure.
I mean,
So,
you
okay,
have a you're you said 14, you're 14.
yeah, almost
So I
14.
mean,
Yeah,
look, you have a burgeoning media career.
yeah,
There aren't too many 14-year-olds on the radio. So just look at it that way. You're beating the game.
yeah. Well, thank you. Um, so let's turn over to some 49ers talk. Obviously, we've
Sure.
talked about some history with you, how you covered, but you've lived through both and you've covered both ownerships. Eddie DeBartolo and the Yorks, which is I don't know how long they've owned this team for now, but DeBartolo, I mean, what is the difference between how he ran this team and how the Yorks have run this team? I've heard different opinions, different people being like, he would take care of his players a lot more or whatever. I've heard a lot of different opinions. Since you've covered both ownerships, what is the difference between this guy, well, the former owner and this family that owns it now?
Well, first of all, it's the same family. Okay, so yes,
Okay.
it's a different
Okay.
owner, but
Okay.
the history on it is that the father, in this case the grandfather, bought the team, gave it to his son Eddie DeBartolo to run. Eddie's sister is Denise DeBartolo. She
Okay.
married Dr. John York. Eddie had the team taken away from him as far as his day-to-day control when he
Mm.
got into an issue with Governor Edwin Edwards over some licensing in the state of Louisiana. And so the NFL mandated that the franchise must be stripped from Eddie and run by the sister. So now the sister,
Oh.
Denise DeBartolo York, and her husband, John York, and their son, Jed York, are the ones who run the franchise day to day. But it's still basically this team has remained in the
Yeah.
ownership of the DeBartolo family, but it is a distinct cutoff because they have different personalities. I think it's also you got to remember this: the NFL is in a totally different place
Right.
now than it was for the majority of Eddie DeBartolo's ownership. There was no salary cap in the NFL back then. You could spend whatever you wanted to spend, and his passion, his bottom line was the fans' bottom line. I believe one of the years the 49ers
Mm.
won the Super Bowl, they lost over $10 million on the bottom line. So
Mm.
he didn't care about that because he cared about winning championships. I think now the bottom line is adhered to a little bit more. Uh,
Yeah.
Now the whole equation's changed. Now there's a salary cap, so there's limits to what you can spend. I
Yeah.
still think that they, in fairness to the current regime, they still travel first class. They still spend a ton of money when they do travel. Heck, when when there's an opportunity for the entire team to stay over at the Greenbrier in West Virginia, a resort on the
Yeah.
East Coast, so they don't have to fly back and forth. I mean, Jed York foots that bill, and he doesn't think twice about it. So both ownerships are willing to spend. Eddie was incredibly passionate about winning. I think he needed to win. I think
Right.
now they're running it a little bit more like a business. But I still think, it's still a
Right.
family owned and run operation. It's just a different era where you can't spend and spend and spend.
Right.
Eddie lavished gifts on the players the players' wives and girlfriends. And it's just those things would probably be salary cap violations here in 2022.
Oh, okay.
So there
Yeah.
have to be some adjustments. But I think overall it's a similar regime as far as generosity, but nobody can replace the fire and determination of Eddie DeBartolo Jr. And so that they missed that. They clearly missed that.
Well, and I mean, the winning, like they just want the sustained success. The Yorks, obviously, Eddie. A lot of teams these days, a lot of owners these days are the culture these days has changed from the standpoint of like I feel like a lot more teams are trying to model themselves after what the Rams were. A lot of owners are like, we want what the Rams all in. We're gonna go and get a bunch of superstars. You see it with the LA Chargers as well this year. So like was Eddie more willing to go all in? I feel like he was willing to do, obviously, like you said, whatever it took to win. But has that changed with the Yorks? I feel like the Yorks sometimes, we're fans are sometimes upset because we're not willing to go after the big free agents. Well, are the Yorks has the whole league really changed? Like, so is the whole league similar to what Eddie DeBartolo was, and have the Yorks kind of like regressed? As in, like, are they really really willing to win Super Bowls? And are they like similar to the Eddie DeBartolo, and are they similar to the league? As in, like, is the league able? Is the league are? Well, how am I trying to put this? Is the league
I understand
able?
what you're saying.
Yeah,
I understand
right.
what you're saying. You're saying, is the league more like Eddie used to be,
Yeah,
and they're
right.
in the go
Exactly,
for it
exactly.
mode,
Sorry. Yeah,
and the
that's what I was
DeBartolos by
meaning.
contrast are not?
Yeah.
No, I don't think that's the case. I think the Rams are more the exception. I don't
Okay.
view them as the rule in the league. I think the rule in the league, Benjamin, is that you build through the draft and you kind of add to your mix in free agency. But the Rams were in a unique situation. Why? Because Stan Kroenke spent a ton of money to build that stadium. And they're trying to reestablish their brand in Southern California. The truth be told, the 49ers in 2 games late in the year had more Niner fans in LA than there were Ram fans in LA. So that's a problem. And if you go to LA, the Raiders were there for a long time. There's a lot of Raider fans. The Rams left LA. A lot of those people became Niner fans. The Chargers are now in LA. There's some Charger fans. And so the battle for the football fan in Los Angeles it's up for grabs. And I think the owner, Stan Kroenke, understood that. He spent a ton of money to build that stadium, and he felt like he had to be in the Super Bowl to justify it and to kind of reestablish their brand in Southern California. He put it all into this year, and they got it done. So you got to tip your cap to them.
Yeah, that's a lot of, and it's impressive what the Chargers are doing. It's impressive what the Rams are trying to do. But again, like you said, it's crazy because LA is one of the places, like, you have the Lakers, the Clippers, like it's a really split city. There's a ton of different teams in LA that, like, there's not like one single, the city isn't one single fan base, like, together. Like, there's so many different fan bases in that city. So, like, it's almost, if you're a LA team, it's almost not like a curse, but it's like, oh, we've got all these other teams. It's not a guarantee that most of the fans are going to be for our team because, we've got tons of other NFL teams that are in LA. So,
and there's just a lot to do in LA. You can, there's a lot of people who go to the beach, and there's a lot of entertainment down there, and just a lot to do. So, believe it or not, sports are it's not like Cleveland, Ohio, where it's like, hey, man, if you're Cleveland, Ohio, it's Indians and Browns and Cavs, and that's it. And it's like, you know what? In LA, there's a lot of people doing their own thing, and sports is just a part of society. It's not all of it.
Right. So that's interesting. But do you think, like, so moving on to the NFL draft, obviously we both cover it quite a bit. the NFL draft coming up, do you think the 49ers will find a fix at right tackle in the draft and or second round, whatever, draft, whatever? And do you trust them to develop an O-lineman based on their previous history? I mean, Mike McGlinchey, not a great O-lineman. We're still not sure about Aaron Banks. We're still not sure about all the other guys that they have drafted. Or could it simply be that the 49ers just are not going to, are just going to plug and play the different pieces along the O-line? Colton McKivitz, that would be, I'm just kind of scared because I'm like, if we're really going to plug and play all of these rookies or whatever that we didn't trust last year and we're just going to play them this year, like, I'm a little bit scared about that. So do you think the 49ers try to draft one in the second round or in the draft or whatever? And do you think it works out?
Well, I mean, Mike McGlinchey had a pretty serious injury, tore the
True.
quad off the bone, but I think you still have to give him the start at right tackle. I think he's the starter at right tackle. Now,
Right.
Jalen Moore was drafted. I think he showed a lot last year in the preseason. I expect him to play a lot this year.
Yeah.
And I expect Aaron Banks to play a lot this year. So I don't know what to make of this. We talked about this earlier today. Grant Cohn and I did about, what are expectations for these guys? But the 49ers have maintained that they have tons of confidence in them. And, Banks was a good player at Notre Dame, and Jalen Moore really looked good in the preseason. So I do think they'll draft an offensive lineman. I don't think it's going to be that high. I think the offensive line is going to be further down the list of needs. But I think they will draft an offensive lineman in this draft. I think it's going to be an interior lineman, but it might be a tackle. And I know they looked at the kid Gene DeLance, who played at Florida. He's a guy they've at least looked at. But I do expect them to take an offensive lineman, but I don't think it will be on day one. Well, I don't think it'll be day one or day two. It'll be a day 3 pick, and it will probably be an interior player. That's my guess.
So do you think they go more? Do you think they go more cornerback defense in day 1 or day 2? My bad.
Well, we got to see. I mean, if they stay at 61, I mean, I think, what are if you're a 49er fan, you know what the 49ers do in the draft every year. They go D-line, right? D-line, 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 D-line. So I would expect more D-line, or they have a need at free safety. They have a need at nickelback. They have a need at corner. They have a need at guard on the offensive line. They have a need at speed receiver is going to be an option for them. I mean, if there's a certain receiver that can stretch the field, I mean, I could see that. I wouldn't even be shocked if running backs tend to fall down the board. If a guy like Kenneth Walker from Michigan State, who was a terrific player in the Big Ten this year, if a guy like that is on the board at 61, I could see them going running back, despite the fact they have Trey Sermon and Elijah Mitchell. I think there's a lot of different directions they can go. They're almost in a spot to go best player available at 61.
I have a player that I think we might have to trade up for, but have you ever heard of Zion Johnson? Almost exact
guard from Boston College.
Bro, his body type almost exactly like Laken Tomlinson's. He's 6'3", 312. Laken Tomlinson, 6'3", 315. So those two guys almost the exact same. And I mean,
that's a good call. I like that. I like that player a lot.
Yes, his run blocking. I've watched some film on him. I found him a few weeks ago. I've watched some film on him, and I mean, he's not as good in space. Like, his athleticism isn't as good in space, so he wouldn't be as good in like a spread offense. But his ability to read the defense and get up to the second level and really read blocks and what blocks he should do, his IQ is amazing. I think he would be a great, perfect replacement because left guard for Laken Tomlinson. I think if you're looking for a guard in the second round, that's the guy to get. But the thing is right now I have him ranked at I think it's like 450. No, I think it's like 45 or something like that. So they would have to trade up like mid second round to get him. So I'm not sure about that. But again, I do expect them. I think they need to go get a receiver in the later on. I think wouldn't you say they maybe try to target a receiver later on in the draft?
It's a great, this is like the third year in a row I've said this, but it's a great draft for receivers. Really a terrific draft for receivers. So, I mean, literally, there's going to be good receivers taken in every single round of this draft. There are going to be good receivers
Yeah.
taken that are going to be drafted, that they're going to be signed after the draft. That's how many receivers there are. So, yeah, I really like that. I like the idea of going with a receiver. They need a certain kind of receiver. They have
Ooh,
big
yeah.
and physical receivers. They
They
need
need
a
a slot,
field.
kind of.
Well, they need a slot, or they could use somebody who can really
Yeah.
run. I mean, somebody who could run in the 4.3s.
Yeah. Well, and guy that Wan'Dale Robinson, ever heard of him from
Yeah, from
Kentucky?
Kentucky, love him.
Yeah, he was I think a top 10, one of the fastest 40 times there. Everyone wants Christian Watson. I would say no to that. He's probably going to be a late first round pick or early second. But Wan'Dale Robinson is great because he's 5'8". Like, he's not that tall, but he can stretch the field. Played a little bit of running back, kind of like a smaller Deebo Samuel. I wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised. He's probably a 4th round pick, I would say, early 4th, which is what we have. So, yeah, I mean, that's the perfect thing as well. And as the draft comes closer, I'll get more into it. But any other players that you have suggesting that you would like them to get? I mean, there's safety.
What
They
position
might
are
go
you looking
safety.
at?
Cornerback. I have a name for cornerback, but I'm looking at like slot cornerback because we lost K1. We lost a ton of guys in free agency. And we're looking to fill those holes on the defense. So,
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good cornerbacks. The Sam Houston State corner, McCollum,
okay.
is a good player. He's a big player, like 6'4".
Ooh,
I don't
okay.
know how much they're going to be looking for a corner, though, because they have Charvarius Ward. They got Emmanuel Mosley. They still could re-sign Jason Verrett.
Ambry
He's a
Thomas.
Bay Area kid, so he may come back. You got Ambry Thomas, and they have Diamador Lenore still. I know he didn't play a lot at the end of the year, but you have 5 corners right there and a couple others behind them. So I would say Dante Johnson was re-signed.
Yeah.
I would say corners a need. I don't know if it's their primary need.
Yeah.
There's a number of corners that I really like in this draft. But that's the one that really sticks out. Zion McCollum from Sam Houston State. But I mean, Seven Banks is a corner from Ohio State, and I believe Seven Banks might be a day 3 pick. But I really like Banks a lot.
Yeah.
He's not going to have great workout times, but if
True.
and I'm not even 100% sure that he stayed in this draft. I got to see that again because I'm not sure if he's still in it. But if he is, I do like him. I'll tell you another guy that is a terrific player, and he ran terrible, so he's going to be there on day 3.
Yeah.
Is the Georgia corner Darion Kendrick? Kendrick ran 4.7 something the other day at Georgia's pro day. And so even though a lot of people had him projected as a 2nd or 3rd round pick, he's now, because of that time, no chance he's going in the 2nd or 3rd round. He's going to wind up in the 4th round, 5th round, 6th round, in that range. And to me, when you watch him play, he plays much faster than that time.
Okay.
So that ultimately is what really matters. So yeah, if you can find Darion Kendrick in the 5th round or later, man, that's the guy I'd go get.
Yeah. What do you think of Marcus Jones? Have you heard of him from Houston?
From Houston.
I fell in love with him. His athleticism, his play style, his dual threat ability. The thing is like, where would he go? I think he would probably be 3rd round. He didn't go at the combine, run at the combine or whatever. I think he might still have a pro day, but he's a guy that he's probably one of my favorite guys that I really want the 49ers to draft. They might not, though. I don't know.
He's a feisty corner.
Yeah.
What I really like about Marcus Jones is he's a really explosive return man. So, you're talking about a nickel corner, maybe a slot corner who can be, also be a return man. I like Marcus Jones. 5th round. I think that's maybe 4th round. I could see him going there.
Yeah.
He has great movement ability, but he is 5'8". And if he was 5'10", 5'11", I think he's probably a late 1st round pick. But at 5'8", he's probably going to wind up in the 3rd or 4th round. But I really like him.
Okay. Well, 3rd or 4th. Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. And we always want to get all these high picks, like all these picks. The 49ers obviously only have so many higher round picks. So there's only so many guys that they can go get. But I think it's realistic to think, the guy from Boston College, maybe Marcus Jones. I think it's realistic um to to um to say that the 49ers could draft him, because I think Marcus Jones is third round pick about. So who knows where he could go, early third round, who knows? But I think not running at the combine actually kind of is key, because that might have dropped his stock a little bit. So
yeah, we'll see. The one thing about the pro days is, that's what this month is about for the road scouts. They all go around to these pro days and make sure you have an accurate measurement, accurate time. Because you know what? It's just, you take the guys who don't go to the combine, and then it's just a matter of, there's sometimes a huge range of times that the rest of the teams in the league will gather for the players who don't go to the combine. And you may have a 4.5 time on somebody who another team has clocked at 4.7. So it really, these individual pro days actually matter quite a bit.
True. So moving on, we've talked about the draft, and still the thing looming in all of our faces. I don't want to say Jimmy Garoppolo is like a cancer, but like a form of it. He's a guy that never wants to go away, and a lot of 49ers fans, obviously, we have for some reason not hate, but like, we don't really like him. So he's still not going away. Next season, okay, so do you think the 49ers are actually keeping because comments, Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch, mostly John Lynch said, we would be fine with keeping him for next season. So are you buying that, or are they just saying, are they just saying, that's so that they won't show their hand? I mean, maybe to still hold on to whatever trade value he has left, if there if there was any trade value. So,
well, I mean, first of all, we don't, I would imagine that there's not a lot of interest in Jimmy Garoppolo. One, there aren't a lot of teams left that need a quarterback. So, and he's coming off shoulder surgery. So, and he's got a huge contract. It's not like you're you're trading for this guy to pay him $5. He's got a $25 million contract. Right. So I think that has a lot to do with it. So I don't think they have an offer on the table for Jimmy, but there's a lot of things that can happen in an NFL offseason.
Right.
Trey Lance is working out, getting ready for the season. What if he tears his bicep in the middle of working out, and you just cut Jimmy Garoppolo?
Yeah.
So is it smart to do that? Probably not. And then what if another team's quarterback gets hurt working out?
True.
You say, well, that's not going to happen. It happened last year to Carson Wentz. He worked out for like 3 days. He was hurt. So, I think that they feel like that money that Jimmy Garoppolo is making was going to be earmarked for extensions for Bosa and for Debo.
Okay.
So when do they want to give those extensions? Really not until July. So the 49ers can sit back and just wait. And they have no more guaranteed money headed towards Jimmy. If they want to July 1st say, Jimmy, you're cut, they can do that. And to me, it does make sense why they would hedge their bet. I don't think anybody who's going to go for it, as far as, I do think they're bluffing. I don't think he's going to be on their roster, but it's a very interesting situation to watch, because if they hold him until July and then cut him in July, that might be the best thing for them, as far as not, having coverage at quarterback. But they may have some of the veterans in their locker room who are critical of the management for how they treated Jimmy Garoppolo. So I don't know. I don't know what's coming next, but I would not, if I had to guess, my guess is he would be traded on draft day. That would be my guess.
That's what I was thinking as well, like a day before, draft day as well. But I mean, here's my thing. John Lynch, and people are asking, or like people say, like, why is John Lynch backing Jimmy Garoppolo specifically up? Well, John Lynch, I feel like his job as a general manager is to keep the name, is to prop up the organization, is to prop up the integrity. Kyle Shanahan, he's a lot more loose with it. He's saying a lot more things about Trey Lance. I think his job is more like prop up the quarterback that is in front of me, prop up the guy that we all know it's pretty clear is going to be starting. So it's different, like with the general manager's job and the coach's job. The general manager is still trying to prop up the integrity of what this organization's trying to do and trying to sell that message. And then Kyle Shanahan is trying to just give me a quarterback in front of me and I will prop him up. So, it's an interesting situation, but I could definitely see why Kyle Shanahan would be more on the side of Trey Lance, just because, that's the quarterback that I need to work with the most right now because he's going to be our starting quarterback.
Yeah, well, I mean, I definitely think Kyle, wants to work with Trey, but you got to remember John Lynch's job is to get value.
Yeah.
And his job is to make sure that he's making the best decisions in the interest of the 49ers franchise. So, does it benefit the 49ers to cut the player? Well, it may in July, but today it doesn't. So, they're going to do what's best. I think it's pretty clear both Jimmy and the Niners are going to do what's best for themselves.
Yeah, that's true. And again, like right now, I think that shoulder surgery did not help, but I think, them not communicating to each other, I feel like, wouldn't that scare teams, talking about his trade value, wouldn't that scare teams? Is like, okay, he's not communicating with the organization during the offseason. Wouldn't that scare teams a little bit away from Jimmy Garoppolo? Like, why do we want to have this guy on their roster? I don't know.
Well, actually, I think he's got a reputation around the league as being a good team guy.
Okay, yeah.
So
true.
I think when you look at teams like, Indianapolis had Wentz and now the Browns who had Baker, I think one of the things they didn't like about those guys is they didn't feel they were team guys.
True.
So I think Jimmy is viewed as a team-friendly player. It's just a matter of, who wants him and what's the 49ers asking price. And it's a little bit of a game of chicken, and the Niners traded a second-round pick to get him. Maybe they feel like they want a second-round pick in return. Yeah. I'll say this. If there were a bunch of free agents that were out there that were going to sign with the Niners that aren't going to sign with the Niners because of this situation, then maybe that wasn't the best idea. But if their cap room that they were going to create by getting rid of Jimmy is really going to Debo or Bosa, you really don't net money until July.
Yeah, and even if they would have like cut Jimmy or trade him or whatever like that, they still would still have cap issues. Like, it's not like everything would go away if you cut him or trade him or whatever. Like, they still would have cap issues. So that's why, like you said, they could have cut him around free agency, but they're saving it. That's why it doesn't make sense that they keep him till week 1, because the 2 extensions, if you want to keep your 2 best players on both sides of the ball, you need to cut him. So yeah, that's a good point. So
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna get to the next topic. So go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say that, Bosa and Debo, paying those guys, if that is indeed their plan, then, they're going to enact their plan in July, because when teams sign extensions, they hedge their bet. You're not going to give the guy the money, a month before camp. What if he gets hurt in that month? So they like to issue those extensions right as those players are beginning to hit the field for training camp.
True.
So that's really the deadline for the Niners.
Yeah. That's a good point. You don't want to risk anything. Yeah. Interesting. So moving on, are the 49ers, because they lost, let me quickly name, like, on the defensive side and the offensive side, let me quickly name who they have lost in free agency and to free agency. On the defense, DJ Jones, Arden Key, Contavious Street, K'Wan Williams. 3 of those names are really important. Offense, Trent Sherfield, Laken Tomlinson, Tom Compton, Richie James, Raheem Mostert. Tom Compton, we all like to hate on him, but he was a pretty solid right tackle. Laken Tomlinson was a good left guard. So my question to you, they really haven't, except from the corner position, they really haven't addressed any of those needs. And we just talked about the draft, but as of today, the 49ers still a top 5 roster with all the pieces that they've lost, especially on the defense, but as well the offense?
That's a great question. I would say probably still a top 5
Yeah.
roster. They're going to ask some young guys like Aaron Banks and Javon Kinlaw, Jalen Moore to step into roles and play well. But, and they're going to have to replenish some of that depth that they lost in the draft and after the draft. But yeah, I still think it's a talented roster. Top 5, man, I would say it's hard to say. Definitely top 10. But if you really went through every roster with a fine tooth comb, I bet you it's pretty debatable. But yeah, I would say, between 5 and 10.
Yeah, I think, it was a shock to me that we didn't get a little bit more aggressive in free agency just because we lost all of these people. I mean, K1, that's a huge loss. That's a guy that's been solid. We haven't had to worry about that position for years. Like, yes, he gets injured, but like, are you really like the question that I have for the 49ers are why, like, I get with the Aaron Banks thing, maybe, but like the Ambry, like who is going to fill that nickel cornerback position, or are you just going to completely rely on the draft? Like, that's not a very good bet. So my thing is like, I think the 49ers are going to try to get it would make no sense if they didn't try to make another run at one of these other free agents, because you have safety that's still in need. I mean, you still got Jaquelski Tart. They'll probably re-sign him. You've got quite a few players that now safety, cornerback, offensive line, everything else that you really need. And if the season started today, the offensive line, I wouldn't really trust it. And I'm kind of scared because Aaron Banks, Javon Kinlaw, we've seen what he can do. He gets injured a lot. So, man, it scares me to see that we're actually kind of relying on all of these guys. It's a big risk.
Well, I mean, okay, first of all, corner. I mean, Charvarius Ward is going to play one.
Yeah,
he's going to play one corner spot. The other corner spot's going to be Ambry.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
And then Emmanuel Mosley is going to slide into K1.
Oh, okay, okay.
So I think those are your top 3 corners. And then you've got Dante Johnson and Diamador Lenore and whoever they draft or acquire after that.
Okay, that's
so.
True.
I think Emmanuel Mosley will plug in.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're going to need some players like Banks and Kinlaw and Mosley to step up and fill roles. And they're going to have to replace them in the draft. And how good is their depth going to be? How good of a team are they drafting wise? We're going to find out.
Well, and I forgot about the that Ambry Thomas can do like nickelback corner. That's interesting as well. But again, it's you're a team that you lost. I mean, it's crazy because your defense. It's really it's so hard to realize like what you have until it's gone. The free agents. Our roster was really stacked because all of these guys left on the free agency and got bigger contracts. And it kind of gives me a little bit of hope because most of these guys are brought in as undrafted free agents or just off the streets, and they're getting big contracts. So it does give me a little bit of hope that these guys can succeed, that we've drafted or picked up, because, the guys before them have succeeded. So,
I mean, they've lost some good players for sure.
Yeah.
I think the biggest loss is DJ Jones.
Yeah.
I think losing Contavious Street hurts. Today they lost Arden Key. So they lost Lake and Tomlinson. Yeah. So they're not quite as deep or as good on the line of scrimmage. And they're going to have to improve for sure. But, this team established a surplus by drafting pretty well. And we'll see, free agents can sign right up until, right into camp. So, they'll probably at some point get Garoppolo moved. They probably will be more active in the second and third phase of free agency. And they are armed with 9 or 10 draft picks. And they may add to that list. They may add to that number, I should say. So they're still in a pretty good position, but they have lost some good pieces.
Right. Well, everyone, I think that's about it. That's the end of our topics, questions, whatever. This has been Larry Krueger, everyone. Thank you for everyone for watching, and thank you for coming on. I really enjoyed it. Just
Hey,
hearing your
anytime,
story.
man.
Yeah.
Anytime. Appreciate it.
Thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you guys again, possibly on Saturday. It's been a pleasure, everyone, and a pleasure talking to you, because definitely talking to a person that has a lot of experience, something that I would maybe want to get into one day, definitely excites me. So thank you.
Absolutely. Anytime, man.
We'll see you guys again soon.